Hello, everybody. You are listening to The Soloists. I am Diana Brown. I'm here with my good friend and co-host Mallory Everton. We haven't recorded an episode in a little while, but our guest today, Rosalynde Welch, reached out after what has come to be known as the Benito Bowl, the Super Bowl's halftime performance with Bad Bunny, which has come to be the most widely viewed Super Bowl performance of all time, with some interesting thoughts about the message. And I am so excited. Rosalynde, I've been scouring the internet for anybody who shares the brief preview of your take that you gave me. And I think this is going to be pretty original content. So I'm very excited.
That probably means I'm utterly wrong, but I'm excited to at least be original in my wrongness.
You're never wrong in art. You can't be wrong in art.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you. I should be an artist.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I've known about Bad Bunny for a while, mainly because he once had a concert in Washington, D.C., and it took me like hours to find parking because of it. But
so you hate him is what you're saying.
I've never really like sat down and listened to him before. So anyway, what about you guys? So and maybe we can just start with like what was your experience watching this?
So I have been aware of Bad Bunny for a long time as an icon, as a hot dude. And just like incredible dance bars, like the song he did with Cardi B forever ago. Like, so he's been on my radar for a long time, but I hadn't listened to a full album until this most recent album, which I listened to after I listened to the Rosalía album. And I am one of those only English speaking Americans who is interested in the music because of all of the musical elements, but I actually don't know what I'm listening to, just the way we might with classical music in different languages. It really is about how the music makes you feel. The interesting thing with Bad Bunny is that the more that I've learned about him, the more that I understand that I'm missing a lot when I don't know what he's saying, because he's actually saying quite a bit. And and often being pretty subversive with the stuff that he's singing about. I just become a little bit more of a fan of him every day. The Super Bowl drilled it in. It was my favorite performance I've ever seen at the Super Bowl. I loved the energy of it, and I loved the choices he made. Again, like just from the perspective of appreciating him as an artist, I think for me, one of the highest compliments you can pay an artist is that it feels like they're being honest. I get the sense from everything I know about him that he's being quite honest to himself and to what's important to him. And so, yeah, I'm a fan.
Well, my introduction to Bad Bunny comes through my daughter. I have a 19-year-old daughter who I think he first came onto her radar around 2022. And I would just kind of hear about him a little bit from her. And she was arrested by the way he kind of was playing, at least for a time, was playing with gender norms. I guess for a while he was appearing, maybe it was around the time that Harry Styles was doing a similar thing. But he would wear dresses. He just kind of played with the conventions of machismo. My daughter noted he had a septum piercing, and that was notable to her. And for her, she's a typical kind of Gen Z, very progressive on issues of sexuality. So she saw this as a kind of advocacy for the LGBT community and for trans people in particular. And so she was interested in him and had like a positive impression of him. And so that was pretty much all that I knew. Puerto Rican reggaeton artist who seemed to kind of have a bundle of sort of progressive causes behind his music, right? So then, and I really had not kept up on much of the discourse leading up to the Super Bowl. I didn't even know that there was like an alternate halftime show being planned by Turning Point USA or anything. But I had caught a little bit of the controversy. So I was actually watching the Super Bowl with my husband and my son. My daughter goes to college in California now, so she wasn't there, but we were texting each other. And before it started, I turned to my husband and my son, channeling the like boomer that I am becoming. And I was like, okay, you guys, do you think it's going to be overly sexualized or overly politicized? I'm like, which one is it going to be? Pick one, right? So I kind of went in not expecting to really enjoy it very much. I haven't enjoyed some of the past Super Bowl shows. And so I went in kind of very skeptical. But I have to say, within just a few seconds, I think, like you're saying, Mallory, just the aliveness of the performance, how unusual it was with all the greenery. After the fact, of course, we were all delighted to learn that there were actual people inside those plants.
Oh, good.
It was so good. It was so creative, so artistic. And I just soon kind of fell in love with it and fell into the story. Like you, Mallory, I really
Mhm.
don't, I do speak Spanish. I can read it, but I couldn't understand any of the words. And so I was fully reacting to the story, the kind of visual storytelling
Mhm.
and the sound of the music. But as the part that really struck me once I really started thinking, there is something different going on here was with the marriage, right? There was this
Mhm.
wedding that like
Mhm.
took place at the center of the show. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. And then I loved like the casita, all the sort of feeling of Puerto Rico. And then I was really moved, like most of the world, I'm sure, with the kind of concluding paean to a sort of Pan-American consciousness, right? And now it's iconic, the big screen behind it. What was it? The only thing stronger than hate is love, or whatever his
Mhm.
slogan was. So I was, by the end, I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. So I texted my daughter right away. We were like, yeah, he was so good. And I was like, well, what did you like about it? And she said, well, I loved that his vocals were so bare. I thought that was really brave. And then she said, and I loved the marriage story at the center of it. And that
Mm.
really, I mean, that stopped me in my tracks. My daughter, she goes to a private liberal arts college. She's, kind of Gen Z. She's taking a gender studies class this semester. And I haven't thought, I just haven't known whether like marriage and that sort of a family and community life is something that she really values or not. And so I was surprised and I was delighted to hear that it was the marriage story that she really liked, right? That captured her and that she really valued. And that and I was just delighted and relieved to hear that. It can be awkward to ask your 19-year-old daughter, so what are you thinking about marriage these days, honey? Have you been indoctrinated by
Yes.
your liberal college to reject everything I value, right? I don't really bring it up to her like that. So this was like an interesting insight into what she valued. It made me really happy. And then it really motivated me to start thinking a little bit more about maybe some of the deeper meaning behind this. And we don't want to get too deep, right? Like, I'm not saying any of this was intentional on Benito's part, but to think about, is there a kind of almost subversive counter message that's happening here in this behind the sort of sexy girl dancing
Mhm.
surface, which I also like, don't get me wrong, of the halftime show. So that's my halftime show journey. But I wonder, Diana, I would like to hear. I know you like it. It really, you responded to this on like a visceral level. At least that's what I gathered from the
I
reels that you were
did.
posting.
Yeah, I think my Bad Bunny journey dovetails really well with yours, Rosalind. And so I watched it with a friend, and I'm not really into football. I don't know anything. I didn't know even Bad Bunny was doing this. So I, like you, didn't follow it at all. And I like half watched it because I was like at a restaurant when it was on. And so I didn't really think much of it except for it was like so cute because I was at this Martin's Tavern in Washington, D.C., which is like, it's actually a very traditional one. They've got like these little booths where it's like, this was JFK's favorite booth. This is where Nixon found out that he was in trouble with the water. Like they've got like all of these historical plaques and booths, and it serves like old school American colonial food. So it's kind of a little funny. And I felt like it was this great American moment because, and this is what I was watching, which is like, it's this restaurant that's like super like presidential, regal. And honestly, like it gives white, like in terms of
Yeah.
the food, the taste, the aesthetics, like, and yet like the whole restaurant went on pause during the halftime show, and all of the Latino staff and the chefs and the wait staff just came out and they were just like dancing and like enjoying the show. And a couple times they would check in and be like, do you need water or anything? And we were like, no, we're good. Just enjoy it. So that was actually like so charming. I've always loved those moments when there's just like a rupture and people just give themselves permission to like act different. Anyway, it was very fun.
Mm.
But then, okay, so I didn't think anything of it. And then I started getting the reels on, coming up on my Instagram over the next few days. And I don't know how to say this. I just got so addicted. I was like, what is this about this man's aura? And I just like could not stop watching them, like the aesthetics, like his ivory cream gloves. And like, I think like, here's what I would describe why I liked it. First of all the talk around it was like, oh, he's only singing in Spanish. He's celebrating his culture. He's showing Puerto Rican pride. And that's true, but I feel like that kind of undersells what he did it. Like, okay, so in general, in our discourse, when we think about like minorities and like advocating for minorities, I think we've kind of grown used to like people like wanting to put blame on people in power and like accuse them of not understanding and not getting it. And like there's a little bit of like we've been through so much. When are you going to like, and all of that's like true. And so I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, but I was just so struck by like, he did not persuade me that I should feel bad for Puerto Ricans. Like by the end of that show, I was like so jealous that I don't do salsa. I was like, oh my gosh, I should be having so much like sex and fun. And like, I just like, I felt like so like sensually alive. And I was just like, was so struck that that performance did that to me. I don't know if that makes sense, but like he invoked real like envy that like I'm not Latino, which is like actually one of the lyrics that he's singing. Everybody wants to be Latin, but they don't have the flavor, and the reggaeton is one of the lyrics of his songs. And like he just like effectively did that for me. And I think that's why I was like so addicted to watching these reels. It was just like so fun, and everyone looked like they were having such a good time. These scenes, they were so like intergenerational, all of these things where he's passing like shots to different shop owners or, passing the football. It was so like social and communal. I thought that was a good counter because, as we all know, his song that he opens with is Titi Me Pregunto, where he's like, I have a lot of girlfriends. They have all sorts of first names, and I don't want to marry any of them. And like a lot of his songs are basically about how many women he has in his life and how he feels even a little disoriented about it. I thought that was like very nicely countered by this, like, and at least some people are doing the marriage thing. And then, like, children were so present. There were children everywhere. Like, he wakes up a child sleeping on the chairs during the wedding and gives him a football, and the kid, like, runs off. And, like, or obviously the moment when he gives the kid a Grammy, there's a kid, like, in the Puerto Rican house when he, like, anyway, it was just like, and there were elderly people in it. It was just, like, such an intergenerational having a good time. And it made me, yeah, it made me like jealous. And I thought that was like a very cool sort of non-political political statement, basically.
I think it's so nice that actually he was like, I'm a single man and I'm a part of this community. And there's marriage and family and all of these people that we're all a part of this big life together. And I feel like there was something really lovely about it being like, this is me and this is them and these are both good. And I do think that that's one of the reasons that we find artists like him so, I guess, inspiring, because I think oftentimes what's happening with art in general, and when people kind of break through and they do something really interesting, it's often, I think, because they're healing some part of our broken culture. We've overweighed a certain part of life, and now we come over. Like, if you think about music like this and how maybe historically it's been quite misogynistic potentially, or very sex focused, sex heavy, a lot of that is because of cultural sexual repression. So I wouldn't say that it's like all bad when culture swings into an area that might scare us sometimes. But for us to be able to come back to a place where it's like if you watch the music video for that song, there aren't there are some sexy ladies in it, but I was expecting like full male gaze, as many like body shots as possible, and that is not what that music video is at all. It's like more about the whole conversation of like actually too much sex. I just think there's so much there. I think he's threading an incredible needle with this.
Yeah, I agree with all of those takes, especially the needle threading. And like you, Mallory, I think if there's a real, all these pendulum swings are related to each other, and sometimes they get more extreme because of the extremeness of what came first. But I don't know if you guys have discussed this on the podcast, but yeah, there really is a kind of sex recession that's going on, and single people, married people less than single people. People are just having a lot less sex today. And I see that as a big problem, right? So I appreciated that. Like you, there was quite a lot of booty shaking, but I didn't find it to be too horrible. I found it to be joyful. There's some male gaze going on there, and I'm gonna dive into that a little bit. But overall,
yes,
I enjoyed the sexiness of it. And like you, Diana, yeah, I was, first of all, I want to just give a shout out to his craftiness. He was so brilliant in the way he threaded the needle, like you said, Mallory, and sort of did an end run around all these criticisms of him, right? That it was going to be too anti-Trump, it was going to be too political, it was going to be too edgy, and it was all those things in certain ways, but just all under the surface of this incredibly joyful celebration of a place, right? So he made all his points, but in ways that were beyond critique from his political enemies. I don't know whether he is the artistic and communications genius behind all those choices or whether he works with the team, but I was just amazed at the political savviness that he demonstrated that. And I loved how it doesn't really map cleanly onto these left-right categories that here in America, in the United States at least, can get so ossified, right? Where it's like you're in one camp or the other and it becomes so predictable. He really scrambled that in a way that was super fun to watch.
Yeah.
So then to your first point, Diana, about place and about kind of recreating a sense of place and a sort of envy in viewers, right? To be a part of that place. I so agree, and I love that part, that dimension of the show. He has a short film, as I got interested in this, he has a short film that he released with, as I understand it, the release of his last album, Debí tirar más fotos, which is, I should have taken more photos. Have you guys seen that little short film that he released?
I haven't. I've heard the whole album, but I haven't seen the film.
Yeah. I have not heard the whole album, but I did come across this short film, and it's really beautiful and very melancholy. It's the story of this old Puerto Rican man. He's in his little casita, and he's looking at old photos. And in fact, the photo that he's looking at is a picture of his wedding day. And he has like a little animated frog. I'm sure there's some meaning behind that. I don't know what it is that he's talking to, but he's saying, my way of life feels like it's disappearing. I'm forgetting these things, and I wish I had taken more photos, right? That's where the title comes from. And then it shows him going out and going to a bakery. So he's walking down the street from his little house and going to a bakery. And it's very on the nose critique, okay? Not a lot that's subtle about this little film. But as he walks down the street, there's like American big hair rock coming out of one little casita. There's like country music coming out of another one, with like a MAGA looking family grilling steaks on the lawn. So this is a comment on the Americanization of Puerto Rico, right? Sort of an anti-imperial comment. And then he gets to the bakery, but he walks inside and it's been totally transformed into like a Panera style bakery, right? All the hallmarks of like the fast casual format. And so he goes up to the register, and it's an American girl there who barely stateside American girl who barely speaks any Spanish, and she has a horrible accent when she does, and she's speaking to him in English. They don't have any of the foods, or they've been all Americanized, and then the crowning moment is when he goes to pay, pulls out his money, and she's like, "No, we don't take cash. This is cashless." And he doesn't have a phone, so he can't pay with the tap, right? But then a young man stands up and pays for him, and he's, they have this intergenerational moment of recognizing together that their sense of place has been destroyed, right? It's gone, but they remember it and they value it together, and they have this moment together. So it's a very, very melancholy, even despairing little film about the loss of this place, right? And place not as a location, but in sort of this deep kind of philosophical sense of a place that has a history. It's a history that includes humans, that humans have made, but that exceeds human intentions, right? It's not the kind of place you can just decide to make. It precedes and exceeds any individual human will. And it's like this envelope for a whole way of life. And it can only develop organically. But it is now gone, right? And then you recognize the irony of the title, which is like, I should have taken more photos, Debí tirar más fotos, but what would that have done, right? He could have taken more photos, but that really wouldn't have saved or made it possible to preserve what he's lost in this place. So I think that is a really important precursor to the halftime show, where it seems like he is trying to. It's the opposite. It's the flip side of the short film. It shows what Puerto Rico was, right? When it was still this true, full place, this intergenerational place, this envelope and embracing cocoon for a whole way of life that can't be deliberately like reconstructed, but can be deliberately destroyed.
Mhm.
So I'm going to pause there for a second so I'm not monologuing too much. But yeah, what do you guys think of that? Does that resonate with how you read the halftime show?
I mean,
Mm.
sadly, I think one of the sad ironies of this is, wow, talk about putting Puerto Rico on the map. Like we now have, so if we're just going to get more, anyway, Puerto Rico is going to be absolutely slammed with tourists.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
I mean,
whatever the effects of that will be.
did you hear that he's only doing his shows there so that
Uh-huh.
people have to go to him? He's doing like a Puerto Rican residency. So it's like,
Wow.
if you want to see me, you got to come here. I think in
Yeah.
part because he's concerned about ICE violence around his fans and things like
Yeah.
that in the country right now. But
Yeah. He was told that ICE would go to his
But
shows
that's
in the US.
self-undermining, right, Mallory? And this goes to the
yeah.
tension I want to get at because it's precisely tourists that are doing this to his home. And in fact,
Yeah.
in the short film,
Hmm.
there's this super annoying American tourist couple who's speaking English, looking at their phones, being oblivious. They're tourists, right?
Mhm.
And these like corporatized bakeries, they are catering to tourists, right? So
Yeah.
he can't really escape it, right? And even as he's trying,
Yeah.
as you say, put Puerto Rico on the map, bring people to him rather than going to the imperial metropole, right? He's sort of destroying the place that he loves in
Interesting.
that very act.
Yeah.
It's almost like the halftime show is an act of atonement for the tourism that
Mm,
he's brought to the
Or
island,
will bring,
or
because
will bring. Yeah.
he just
yeah.
launched himself into, like, this is probably the biggest moment in his career, I would
Oh,
wonder. I mean,
for sure.
that might be, like, an overstatement. He's already so, so big, but, like, he just got I just it's rare that you would get a moment as a artist where your audience is just, like, can, like, double or triple or, like, just reach people who would never be into Latin trap, right? Like, so, yeah, I think that is a really sad kind of irony. I don't know what's gonna happen to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
One thought really quick on Place is that he did sing his song on New York in that, and this was
Yeah.
something
Nueva
a
York.
friend pointed out that and so there was some diaspora elements too. So, like a taco stand that's kind of famous among Puerto Ricans in LA and, like, a little bar that's famous among Puerto Ricans in New York, and, like, he even brought there's, like, an old Puerto Rican, like, grandma who everybody, like, knows and loves in New York, and he brought her there, and she was the one who, like, gave him the shot of rum. So he definitely had a sense of, like, Puerto Ricans, like, outside of Puerto Rico as well.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, like the
Mhm.
placeness of Puerto Rico is so vibrant, or at one point was so vibrant, so alive. It was sending out runners, right? Like it could create new little Puerto Ricos in the different places where the Puerto Rican diaspora went, right? They could bring
Yeah.
that place with them. So again, it's not about location, but it's kind of about this way of life. And no doubt there are hybridities, right? The Puerto Rican culture in New York or LA or San Francisco isn't going to be exactly how it is on the island. But I also recognize that and loved that he sort of acknowledged that and claimed
Yeah.
that as a part of what Puerto Rico is.
It sounds like you have more to share with us.
Okay, so yes, so stage 2, all right?
Okay.
Just getting
I
started,
love this,
girls.
and everything you say is great, and I'm like, "Oh, we're not
No.
even."
So yeah, so Valerie, I loved the vision that you painted for us of what is this ideal Puerto Rico that he was trying to either out of guilt or out of
Mm.
idealism try to reconstruct for us in the halftime show. And it contains old people, children, married people, young people, intergenerational, all working together, blue collar. I don't know if we saw any white collar actually, maybe mostly blue collar, but artists and workers and all together. To me, that's something like my vision of Zion, right? I really love it.
Hmm.
But the reality is, and here I've become interested in the work of I believe she's a sociologist. Her name is Alice Evans, and she works right at the intersection of feminism, international development, women's lives, and in particular, she's been focusing on um, fertility crisis, right, that we're experiencing now. And so a lot of my ideas have been shaped by her. So with her in mind and with a recent blog post that she wrote, she pointed out that this was before the halftime show. So I don't think she said anything about the halftime show in particular, but Puerto Rico has experienced one of the most extreme, rapid, and devastating drops in total fertility rate of
Wow.
anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. So they are now at zero point 0.9 children per woman, right? Which is an extremely low fertility rate. And it means that, in just a generation, Puerto Rico will see its population halved, right? Or at least diminished by a third. So this is devastating for Puerto Rican culture. So this kind of rich intergenerational culture that he celebrates, we love it, right? We respond to it. We envy it. Like you say, Diana, there's something alive there that we truly envy. It's extincting itself, right? There is
Yeah.
no generation. And the children that were present in the halftime show. I mean, obviously there are children in Puerto Rico, of course there are some, but their centrality is not a demographic reality in Puerto Rico right now, right?
Wow.
There people are not having children, and children are not at the center of families and lives anymore in the way that they once were. And it is not truly an intergenerational society anymore. I'm not saying that the bonds of love are not warm and real. Of course not. I know a wonderful Puerto Rican woman who is one of my dear friends. They truly do have warm and wonderful. I'm speaking demographically, right? Not personally, but demographically, there isn't a younger generation that is growing up to be inducted into this beautiful, warm ideal of the intergenerational community, this communal society that we have. It's really sad, right? It's tragic because there's only, these sorts of fertility spirals are very hard to pull out of, and it's going to lead to just more of the sort of corporate Americanization that he so deplores. When you don't
Yeah.
have your own community and your own people to replenish the jobs and the houses and to start the businesses and to create art and to create music, right? Where's the next Bad Bunny, right? Where's the 3-year-old, right? Where's the 5-year-old who's going to be the
Totally.
next Bad Bunny? There aren't very many of them in Puerto Rico anymore. And so I don't know that this is on Benito Ocasio's radar whatsoever. I've never seen him talk about it, but it was very striking to me. And I almost wonder whether it might be, right? That he has sort of become aware of this problem and maybe in some way, right, putting marriage and children at the center of the show, maybe at some level signals a kind of recognition that doesn't represent at the moment the reality of Puerto Rican communities on the ground in Puerto Rico right now. So once
Wow.
again, I'll pause for a second. So I'm not monologuing here, but if you guys want to react to that or say anything about that. Right?
It's
Sorry, like
really,
huge
yes.
downer.
Yeah.
No, there's this line that Cynthia and Susan say on At Last She Said It, if you've ever listened to that podcast before, where one of them always says, "This is the lie down part of the podcast." It's like there's always a moment where it's like, and now I need to lie down.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
that's how I
Take a
feel
moment
about
to be
this. It's
depressed
like,
here. Yeah.
how do you treat this? And I mean, I'm honestly still letting the phrase, well, I'm going to butcher the way you phrased it perfectly, but well, when you phrased it before, I'm going to butcher the way you said it before. Sorry, not butcher it perfectly. Sorry, that was a confusing way to say that. But no, when you were talking about these places, which essentially to me are cultures, right? Whether
Mhm.
it be your family culture or your friend culture or the culture that's created in your workplace when the specific organism is there. These things that can't be purposely created, but they can be torn down and destroyed. And that truth feels painful and scary and very real with so much more than just this subject. But I think that this is a helpful full microcosm of what all of us have to figure out how to grieve, how to hold, and what to do with, because I even feel, and maybe this feels like out of left field, but this was just happening in my heart while you were talking, that I was like, I feel like sometimes I feel this feeling, especially just my life is shaped so much differently than I thought it would be in gorgeous ways, but I will not have what I had as a kid. Like,
Mhm.
I can't. I can't have a big bustling family, like a house full of I mean, who knows, I guess, but, like, there's this sense that it's like, this is just that is I can't return to this place, this culture, and that feeling that, like
Yeah.
and this colorful, vibrant, all these personalities enacted in, unity, but also tension and conflict and frustration and in each other's lives and in the deep like, the messiness,
Mhm.
you know? And my life has felt much more isolated and there's been a lot of solitude, and it's very
Mhm.
beautiful, but it's also like it's a tension that I'm not sure what to do with. And I'd like to think that it's not all just doom and gloom, that these cycles happen for reasons that are necessary, but it does look pretty scary. It looks pretty scary to look into the future and say, well, what if we don't have the little Benitos? What if they're not
Mhm.
surrounded by as many people? Will they develop the same sort of ideas? And the truth is, no, they'll develop different ones.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's always hard with art, like how deeply to read intentions into things. But here's a couple things that I'm thinking about, whether I'm reading this into the show justifiably or not. So, since I've started going on my Bad Bunny deep dive, I have, I admit, been quite challenged by his like lyrics sometimes. And today I was like, oh, this song Monaco, what's this actually about? Let me just pull it up because I wanted to read you a couple of these lyrics. This, I think, just speaks to his celebrity and how dissociated he is from himself, from the Puerto Rico that he belonged to, let alone all the demographic things. I will try to censor some of this or skip some of the lines. So this is, you don't know what it's like to be out at high sea with 200 hoes, to have the flight attendant service you in the sky, to what it's like to throw 500,000 at the strip club. That's why I don't care about your opinion. That's why you're 101 of the top 100 and I'm the first and blah blah blah. Anyway, he's singing about his like absurd celebrity. That is just like a recurring theme in his songs. And sometimes it's like this celebrating tone. I'm so awesome that we see a lot.
hmm
Sometimes you
hmm
can tell he's actually like tortured and disturbed by it. And he's like, I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel. I don't feel normal things. And so that's kind of interesting. And I do appreciate his, especially those moments of candor when you can talk about like, what would it be like to be like a celebrity these days when you can command humans at scale and reach humans at scale that I don't think we've ever seen before. I've been thinking about this. This is like a quick tangent, but with K-pop Demon Hunters, this other thing that's
Mhm.
been going around, like
hmm
when it's an animated show, but when they show the audience for the K-pop Demon Hunters, they don't look like heads in a big stadium. They look like stars in the sky.
Hmm.
Just like so many, like a total sea of like
I see.
heads. And there's just something about celebrity these days. And I think this gets into like what billionaires might experience, that there is really this like very weird, like phenomenological experience you must have to be able to like just command so much attention.
Yes.
So that's the number one thing, is like he does seem like at least occasionally disturbed by his dissociation from regular life and the fact that he can have sex with absolutely anyone, meaning that he is kind of disturbed that he's not on this path that so everybody before him has done and that gave him the life that he loves to
Mhm.
celebrate so much.
Uh-huh.
So that's, I guess, the first point. And then the other one really quick is like I'm all of a sudden like rethinking Lady Gaga's part in this, which like
Mhm.
that was just she sang beautifully. I like that rendition more than the original, but the lyrics are
hmm
literally like, if the world was ending, I want to be next to
I'd
you.
want to be with you.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow,
And
Diana, I hadn't
uh
thought about that.
yeah, it's
Yes.
like at the end of the world, like, I wanna hold you just for a while and then die with a smile. Yeah, if the world was ending, I wanna
hmm
be next to you, where it really is this apocalyptic feel of, like, who knows how much time she says that too, that's one of the lyrics. No
And yeah,
one's
in English
promised
too.
time. Yeah,
Yeah.
no one's
One of
promised
the
time, and so I just wanna be with you. But there's this celebrating, like, very immediate, tangible love at the end of the world, so, anyway.
Yeah. Well, that is so that okay, Diana, we it's like we planned this perfectly because 'cause you're setting me up perfectly for my to bring it into the landing, the end of my super long take. Thanks for your
Yes,
patience,
let's
everybody,
do
but
it.
that's so
No, are
okay,
you kidding me?
that's
This is gold.
That is so great. First of all, I'm going to come back to this idea of mass culture and celebrity, because that I think is really key, at least to what Alice Evans is suggesting. But then second, yeah, I had not put that together, but this kind of sense that the world is ending, and the world is always ending. Shout out to our friend Adam Miller, right? The world is always ending, but when that is visible in our demographics, then it's a different kind of ending, right? It's not just an ending for me, it's an ending for us. The world is always ending for me. My world is always passing away. But as a community and as a people, as a species, right? The world continues for us. But if we don't start having babies, this is so hard because I'm talking to two amazing women who are contributing so much to the world, and you guys don't have kids yet, So obviously, let me just repeat once again, like, this is not about individuals. This is not about calling into question anybody's individual choices in Puerto Rico or in Provo, Utah, anywhere, right? This is about huge demographic, systemic changes, right? But yeah, the world will end for us. Ironically, though, that kind of despair, that kind of real pessimism sort of feeds into a spiral. I think that sometimes when people are voluntarily childless, part of the reason is the way, especially on the left, that a real pessimism and despair is used to signal political seriousness. You can show how politically serious you are by how depressed you are, how despairing you are, how pessimistic you are. I think that's really, really self-defeating for causes that I care about that are more on the left, but it is pretty striking, right? And so even as I want to say, yes, the world is ending. And I also want to say, but it's okay. Let's not get too scared about that. Still go ahead, plan your life, right? Do and move forward with hope into your life. Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Returning to my take. All right, guys. So here we go. So I think where this is likely to cause, if I'm making some listeners nervous or mad out there, which I may be, right? I understand that the fertility discourse can be really polarizing, can feel really personal. And there's horrible, childless cat ladies. JD Vance has done more to destroy the quality of this discourse than anybody. So there's lots of really horrible approaches to the fertility crisis, and I don't want to endorse any of those. So, and listeners may be getting an anxious or mad feeling bringing it up, and I understand that. A lot of the disagreement, of course, is what is the cause? And if we can understand the cause, does that point us toward things that we can do to alleviate it, right? To fix it. And I have a very socially conservative part of me. I just do that you guys may not share, and certainly all listeners will not share. But it's easy for me just to say, it is precisely the sexual revolution and the sexual liberalization that brings so much life and fun, right, to the halftime show. But that is almost always that kind of rapid, it's partly a temporal thing. If it happens very, very fast and sexual norms are rapidly kind of destroyed and then remade, it almost always accompanies a fertility collapse, right? Now, a lot of other things are happening at the same time in societies that undergo that. So it's really difficult to say that is the cause. Also, at the same time, women tend to be getting more education. They tend to be participating more in the workplace. There tends to be more economic prosperity. Now, that is not the case in Puerto Rico, right? No doubt, part of their fertility collapse is tied into the absolute economic collapse that the island has seen over the past couple of decades. So the story in Puerto Rico is not the same as the story in South Korea, but the effect is the same, right? And so there's this real question about what causes it. Is it different in every country, or it all started to happen around the same time? And so is there some unifying causal factor? I just want to say, as I was preparing this afternoon to talk to you guys, I was looking into this a little bit, and I think it's worth saying that, and this is what the internet told me, okay? So take this with a grain of salt. I have not gone to the original sources on this, but what the internet told me is that the birth control pill was literally tested in Puerto Rico on Puerto Rican women before it was FDA approved, right? And so, in other words, America, there's a kind of biopolitics at work here, right? A sort of imperial biopolitics where America kind of uses its colonial, as you will, hinterlands to test its poisons, right? If you want to think of it that way. I'm incredibly grateful for the birth control pill myself, right? But there is definitely a political and imperial and biopolitical dimension in Puerto Rico in particular to the collapse in fertility that they have seen there. But still, there's this unresolved contradiction, right, between what Bad Bunny, his artistic commitments, right, the beauty of the world that he puts forth and the depth of his grief for that world that's lost, and then his moral commitments, right, which include this kind of package of sexually progressive causes and not politically progressive as well. And so there is this real tension at the heart of, I think, his project. And the question is, can you selectively preserve certain parts of a world? Can you say, we want to keep everything good about the community, the intergenerational richness, the aliveness of the culture, right? The solidarity of the culture. But we just don't want to have the gender norms and the normativity of marriage. That's the one part we want to excise out. Can we be like a surgeon and just cut out the tumor that we don't want, right? My thinking about place is really shaped by a philosopher named Heidegger. I'm not a Heideggerian, really, so don't ask me any deep questions. But Heidegger would say, no, you don't get to choose that, right? It's all or nothing. Because once again, it's not the kind of thing that can be surgically, deliberately made. You can't make a world like that. It has to organically happen. It has to exceed. It has to be the envelope for a way of life. And so that, again, I guess this is our lie down moment. But so now let's go to Alice Evans. If there's one thing that I hope is of value to you two and to our listeners, Google Alice Evans. Her Substack. There's like an actress named Alice Evans. It's not her. She's like an
Googled
academic,
her
right?
earlier, and I discovered this.
Yeah. So not that Alice Evans.
She was in 102 Dalmatians.
She's really wonderful. She's a great follow on Twitter if you still use Twitter. She has a great Substack. She's a feminist through and through, right? And she oftentimes, reading her, will really call me on when I am jumping too fast to a kind of cliched social conservatism, right? Where I'm like, oh, it's all the fault of feminism and it's all the fault of the sexual revolution, right? She centers women in her thought, their flourishing, their well-being. But she recognizes that women flourish when families flourish. To me, that's my fundamental desire for my children is I have been able to reach my goals because of my husband, right? I could not have done it without that partner. And so I think she recognizes that the fertility crisis is a crisis for women because many women want to have children and because we will not succeed in reproducing communities which value women's liberation and women's flourishing if we don't have children. So the fertility crisis is not an anti-woman problem. It's for women. And so she keeps them front and center. I love her. I really love her approach. And she says in particular, we can be a little bit more specific about the problem here. We don't have to say it's all of sexual revolution. We don't have to get rid of the birth control pill, right? She says in particular, we can narrow in on a problem, and that is that it has become a lot harder for men and women to form relationships. She thinks that is really the key behind the fertility crisis, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Coupling.
Which is, coupling.
It's
exactly.
not really the decision to get. I've been thinking about this book, which I'm going to talk about as soon as have you read this by Anastasia Berg and Rachel Wiseman?
Yes. I haven't read it, but
gosh.
I've heard a couple of podcasts and I know about it. Yeah.
It's called What Are Children For? On ambivalence and choice. But their focus is really on how people come to the decision to have children. But the whole thing also presumes that you're in a position to have children. And that means you are either partnered or have a lot of money. And so, getting to one of those positions has been my struggle 100%. I don't think I've never not wanted kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, this isn't about individuals, as you guys will know and have done so much work for our own culture. It's not about individual. This is about structural issues.
Yeah.
And so Alice Evans's specific hypothesis is something that she calls cultural leapfrogging. And she says that the problems really happen, again, it goes to the timing. When one generation of young women quickly leapfrog forward through kind of demographic transitions, right? And through cultural transitions. Whereas, like in my experience, my grandma um, got married at 17 and did never go to college. She was incredibly smart and enrolled in correspondence courses with BYU. I just learned this and was an amazing writer. But so she didn't even go to college. My mom went to college and I did a PhD, right? So that's an extremely simplified version. But so over the course of 4 generations, there was kind of this cultural progress. And through that, the value of children was preserved. I believe that I have as strong a love and desire and sense of my innate value in being a mother as my grandma did, right? But I preserve that while making very different choices with my life and having lots of opportunities and things like that. So, but she says when that transition happens in a blink, that's seems to be what the problem is, right? And then the desire to marry, or the sense of there are partners out there that I can marry, that gets lost. So for instance, she has really studied Turkey. And the mechanism for this leapfrogging is the smartphone, right? The smartphone, because it puts it in our hands and suddenly we have access. This goes to what you were saying, Diana, to a kind of global culture. So these influencers who reach a hugely global audience now show young women in Turkey or Puerto Rico, for instance, a different kind of life and a different way. And in particular, a different kind of man, right? A different kind of man, a different kind of relationship. And then they look up from their phone, they look around at their world, and there is no man and there is no way to attain the relationship that they see there, right? And so then there becomes that failure to partner, that failure to couple up. And so looking, demographically and historically, she has come to the conclusion that it's this particular acceleration of the time frame that's made possible by the ubiquity of smartphones and by this kind of global culture that we all marinate in, that is behind the failure of men and women. I don't want to say failure again, but the difficulty that men and women experience to come together. And so, in the end, where I would bring this down to a landing, but I will have a postscript, but is like how did most of us experience the halftime show? On our phones through the reels, right? On our phones through those reels that are replayed and replayed and replayed. Some of us were sitting down to experience the communal spectacle, right? I was. But most people who see that will be seeing it through their smartphone on a kind of atomized, asynchronous, right? You're not seeing it together. You're not watching it with friends at the pub. You were, Diana. That was how it was meant to be seen. But they're seeing it alone on their phones in these decontextualized, proliferating media forms. And so there's, again, this is maybe the deepest of the ironies of the Bad Bunny halftime show, which is that the medium and the message are absolutely at odds with each other, right? The message is this beautiful community, right? And the medium, if Alice Evans is right, is exactly what is making that community impossible to achieve. So I'll pause there once more. Does Alice Evans, does her diagnosis ring true to you guys? What do you think about that leapfrogging? That kind of makes sense in my life, but it may not make sense in yours.
So the leapfrogging, just basically culture used to change more slowly is what you're saying. And that the
These
smartphone
fast
allowed you
forwards.
to feel like you belong to something that is not here. And I think this is hugely important. I mean, when I think about my formational environments, it's really complicated. I studied sociology, and I've always thought sociology is so behind and not nearly nimble enough to really think about people's the demographic realities that are shaping them. So for example, with me, I look like I should be, okay, grew up in Utah. I went to BYU. I went to church pretty much every week of my life growing up. I went to seminary, LDS family, all of it, ancestry, all of it. But do you know what it wouldn't capture? That from age 13 on, I loved being on anonymous Harry Potter and American Idol forums online and chat rooms. And I started having these friends. And I remember the first time, actually, you want to hear something so trippy? I remember my first friend that I made online, and I felt so like guilty about it because this was like 2000s and people thought this was so dangerous. My I was like keeping a secret from my parents that I was just like chatting with strangers online. And anyway, it was crazy. I made friends with this girl, Yolanda. Months later, I found out that she was actually LDS, which
Wow.
was
Wow.
so crazy, so crazy. And I remember it being like this light bulb moment of like waking up to it. Anyway, she lived in Alaska. I don't know if Yolanda was her real name. Anyway, but I made friends with, I mean, those were my first really significant like non-LDS interactions too, where I made like real friends. And obviously there were plenty of like non-LDS people in my school, but like we were not having like these rich, meaningful conversations. Like seriously, there's something about text-based relationships too that invite a kind of intimacy. People always talk about it like it's a more shallow form of like in-person belonging. And there's many, many ways in which that's true. And it doesn't offer the same kinds of things. But there's also something that like simply talking on MSN Messenger, it would invite this like insane kind of, I still can experience this with people with whom I have like a very good texting dynamic. It's very different. Anyway, all I'm just saying is like that absolutely shaped my experience growing up. And
Mhm.
it in high school, I was very shy and felt like I was never cool. And I remember just always feeling like consoling myself because I was like, well, secretly, I belong to this other secret, cooler world. And there are people out there who get me, but they're hidden in these crevices of the world. I have this friend in Canada and this friend in Virginia. They get me. And I really did have this sense of a kind of like global belonging and this sense that like my people are hidden out there and I need to go find them. And that was a lot of things. But one thing it absolutely is like a threat to the formational environment that I was raised in, which
Mhm.
is find a good LDS man near you, marry and have children.
Yeah.
And I did not at all experience those things in tension. I never at any point during that time thought that I would do anything other than that. But absolutely, I had started to belong to a different kind of world. And that was the internet's very beginning. So, like,
Yeah.
that's only like
Yeah.
exponentially amplified the extent to which, you just belong to the whole world and place is just destroyed. And then, yeah, just speaking vulnerably, how do you undo it? How do you, like, marry the boy next door?
Can you so like socially, society-wide, but then just within your own self, can you kind of
Yeah.
remake your own subjectivity such that you undo those structures that say, "Hey, there's somebody out there that I need to find," rather than like, "This is the person." Yeah, I don't know that I'm getting it right, but this sense of like
Yeah.
a far and wide hunt that
Mhm.
the destruction of horizons and boundaries that's so exciting and the options that it brings, right? Versus the kind of, yeah, just the sense that what is in my local environment is my world, right? Maybe it goes
Yeah.
back to this question of the world. Yeah, the world. Okay, this is getting deep here, but yeah, the world, even how, how the rice, the corridors were so narrow, right? In the
Mhm.
halftime show. That at first I was like, what is going on? Like this tunnel, it took me a
Keep
minute
it
to even get
small.
it, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's a very bounded, narrow, and he was just moving along the course that was made for him, right? By his world. And it gets a little bigger by the end. It pulls out, right? And then you see the whole, well, and maybe there's a meaning there too. Then you see the stadium as the world now. Diana, you have me thinking. But yeah, the narrowness of those little corridors in which the real world, the real place of Puerto Rico is represented versus the totally unbounded arena of K-pop demon hunters, right? There's no boundary, there's no wall, there's no local, right? There's nothing local about that world. So can you shrink your world back to a local world within yourself
Mhm.
once kind of subjectively at a deep subjective level, those walls have been exploded? I don't know.
That's just Rosalind. I feel like oh man, I have so much coming up on this because Even just the fact that this touches everything in our lives now, like, I don't think we're meant to belong to the world in that way. I don't
Mhm.
think we're meant to have this many quote unquote friends. And like, I was talking yesterday to some friends here in LA, and we are talking about how like technically everybody is like a version of famous. We all have followers. You know what I mean? It's like, what is
Mhm.
this? This is too many friends. You can't talk to 1,200 friends every day.
Yeah.
But here it is. Like this is your number of people. I think the way Esther Perel talks about, I think I heard her say once, thousands of followers, but no one to feed your cat.
Mhm.
It's that. And I mean, to your question about like how do we bring it back? Like, how do you bring it back, at least within yourself? And I keep thinking about, well, just to bring it back to our man, to Bad Bunny. One of the things that I feel like he's really doing, we were talking about his kind of subversive gender norms, nail painting, the lyrics about the Titi Me Pregunta song, or Pregunto? Yeah, is that how you say
Mhm.
question?
Yeah, pregunta.
My aunt asked me a question. The lyrics in that song to me unpack what I think is, because I think we're at a type of apocalypse, and in the Greek for apocalypse is to uncover or reveal. So like I've heard it said before that like life will continue to show you all of the ways that you're not free. And him being able to say like the machismo story has left me empty. I have all of these women and I don't know who I am and I don't like myself and I don't know how to get this. I don't know how to get this back. It's like we are experiencing this apocalypse of the fact that just because we fix some things, like you said, like let's take this part out. Let's just
Yeah.
take this like this conversation about marriage. Let's take this out, and then the issue of sex having real consequences. Let's take that out. You
Yeah.
know, and it's revealed that our problems were deeper than that, much deeper than that. And
Mhm.
that to me is like masculinity that's like hyper, hyper, hyper love starved. Like, there will never be enough. I will never be enough. And I need everyone for millions of years to know my name, versus Bad Bunny being like, point the camera everywhere else. Let me pull in
Mm.
5 different artists. Let me, end it shouting with the crowd and pulling my microphone off so no one can hear me. It's like, that is
Right.
such healthy masculinity. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping that like that is what we're starting to learn during this apocalypse. Like, it
Yeah.
actually doesn't make us happy to be Don Drapers and F boys in society. And that is some of what we've gotten from, which again, we love the birth control pill, but that's some of what's
Yeah.
happened culturally because of it. So I guess I'm grateful for this moment for what it's revealing. And I do think we just got to do this spiritual healing together. We have to figure out how to love ourselves and others properly, and to be able to be a part of something without having to be at the center of it in order to feel okay about ourselves. It's so complex, and I'm hoping also secretly simple.
Yeah, I so appreciate that. I love your reading of his performance of masculinity there, and I appreciate your optimism. And I am a cheerful person, and I do want to end on an optimistic note. Both I think that he was able to see beyond and reach towards something like a healthy masculinity. I love that. And then also I just point to the power of art in this moment. We're also in the shadow of the AI slop apocalypse, right? And how everything about this show was so human. Even to the even people in the costumes that
The
delighted
bush
me so
people,
much.
yes.
Yes, because that was humans. What machine could move so perfectly, so quickly, with such mobility? Probably next year
Mm.
there will be one. But for this year, it was humans, right?
It was
Humans
people
Human grasping.
stepped up.
between 5'6" and 5'9" humans.
Yes.
They
And
had a
and
height
humans
limit.
made the art that all three of us and millions of other people experienced and responded to, right? That show was art, and it exceeded itself, and it produced this excess of meaning in a way that's kept us talking for almost an hour and a half now.
Yes.
And that moved us and that elevated us, and that is real. And we have that going for us. We have art going for us, and we have technology going for us. Let me say, I am not a Luddite. I don't believe in nostalgia. I think nostalgia is a trap. We can't go backwards, like you were saying, Mallory.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our bodies have a wisdom. Our bodies have a wisdom I think the material world has a wisdom, and I think we're gonna discover it. It's been our way from the beginning of the evolution of our species to make tools and to use them to change our environment. And over time, that has worked to our good and to our flourishing, and in particular to women's good, women's flourishing, children's good, children's flourishing. This is a hard moment and it's scary, but I believe that the wisdom is there in our bodies and it's in the world around us. We have that wisdom, we have art going for us. I think we're going to make it.
Well, and another note on optimism, even though, wow, I thought I had an inkling of what you were going to share with us, Rosalind, but
I
this has
wasn't
given
ready.
me
This
a
is
lot to think
awesome.
about. I'm just glad we're just sitting with this because it's very real and it's really resonant with how I feel. I don't feel like I belong to a world right now. And I'll be honest, even my LDS world out here is not one that functions like the world it
Right.
was meant to be, which is just to say like, and that makes marriage and coupling extremely difficult. It feels like it would take a miracle. Like,
Mm.
I don't know, it's hard to explain. But just the way that you don't share
Yes.
cultural touchstones
Right.
with
Let me
people.
just say something, Diana, really quick, and then you keep on going because I want to crystallize this. Maybe coupling can only happen in a world, right? And that's,
Mm.
yeah, yeah.
And I just think about this all the time in terms of the struggles with coupling. Anyway, just on this note of optimism, because I have not been following the fertility discourse as closely as you have, but enough that I've seen a lot of graphs and a lot of like fear and just panic and that is so true and justified. I also think that in the same way that the only thing stronger than hate is love, the only thing stronger than fear is like, I don't know, joy. And there was something that show left me with that was so like, I wanted to be absorbed into it. It did definitely feel like it celebrated the very messy process of having fun, being young and sexual, partying, getting married, passing on to the next generation. He was just like celebrating that and making you like want it and want the mess of it. And I
Yeah.
think like we have a generation that is so like fearful of marriage and leads to this carefulness. You also see that same mood and tone reflected in the way that we talk about the fertility crisis. So if somebody can make you like not just tell you that you should have children, but make you want children, that is
Yeah.
Yeah.
really, that's like a much more persuasive appeal. Like I have felt the fear and the panic of like, oh no, and I'm part of the problem of this fertility
Yeah.
crisis. But it's rare that I watch a show like that and I'm like, I'm ready for the mess of life. And that's how it made
Mhm.
me feel. So
Yeah.
I thought that was very cool. Yeah.
And I love
Oh,
that you saw it in that communal environment first, Dan. I think that's so key, right? Like you experienced as a communal event that you were sharing together with other people. And I was pessimistic before saying most people saw it on their phones. I don't know if that's true or not numerically, but a lot of people saw it. A lot of people
yeah.
saw it in a gathering together. And
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, that's how it's meant to be. And I bet that that was part of it, right? That you first experienced it there. I know exactly what you mean by its aliveness and by the envy and the hunger for life that it stimulated in me too.
Mhm.
Get
I
messy,
think that's
Diana.
yes. I love that so much. I think it's really helpful. I think it's really helpful to parse that out because I'll admit that one of the things that has caused me sort of the most friction in approaching this subject has been the idea that the reason you should have kids is because it's the only good life.
Mm,
And that anything but a story where you had kids would be an incomplete somehow. And I feel like that approach is, of course, not very motivating. It's not it
Mm.
because it's fear-based. It's fear-based because, like, the only reason you should have kids is because you're in lack. But Diana, to frame it as, like, welcome the mess. How alive would you like to feel in your life? And wouldn't you like to take risks and see many colors and uncover many mysteries, um, and new senses of self and new parts of you and parts of other people? I think that's a really gorgeous way to say it.
Amazing. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share these ideas. That was so, it was such a fruitful piece of art for me to think about. And I've really enjoyed putting these ideas together. You guys are the perfect interlocutors. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk.
It was such an honor. You're so
All
brilliant
our
and
pleasure.
really always thinking of the important questions. Thanks to you both. Thank you for
Bye.
your time
Bye.
and